This is the Uprising Revival channel. Welcome to today's show. I want to upload here a video that's exclusive to the website, uprisingrevival.com, so you can see some of the content that's available on the website. This is the type of stuff that will get banned off of YouTube. However, I'm willing to take a strike to get this content out because I see so many Christians are deceived about who the real Jews are and who the fake Jews are. And I'll flat out say it in the video because I don't really care at this point. This channel recently was taken out of the YouTube Partner Program, which means in a nutshell, once you're out of the YouTube Partner Program, the algorithm will not recommend you to new people. Your channel will be limited at best. So I will be uploading new content on the Eye for an Eye channel and the United Uprising channel, as well as my brand new channel, the Call for Vengeance. Hard to keep track of all of them. So if you're not sub, before I play you this video from the website, please subscribe to those channels now. Do me that favor. That's where my new content will be for anybody out there that's looking for me. I recommend you do it now before the video plays because this will probably be getting a strike because of the content that is in it. This is the type of stuff they don't want you to see involving all these people out there who constantly talk about, who are now awake to child trafficking, to all this stuff going on with kids, and they don't seem to understand who it comes from. The people who are protecting themselves under a wall of anti-Semitism, who claim to be Jews and are not, are of the Synagogue of Satan. They're the same ones that Christians want to stand side by side with because they don't have a good or proper interpretation whatsoever of who these people are. They don't understand that Israel was created as a state in 1948. Before that, it was not the state of Israel. And, you know, it's very frustrating for me. So I'm going to play you this video. If you haven't joined the website yet, Uprising Revival, this is the type of content you get over there. So please make sure you sub now. Over on the Eye for an Eye channel, I'm going to have new content up tomorrow and continuing every single day. And some of the stuff over on the website, again, I'm just going to put this screenshot in there before I get to playing this video for you because this is what's going on in our world. Okay? This is what they're doing. They are hurting people. I can't emphasize it enough. Over on the website, a subscriber posted this terror alarm. Fiona Bliss, who like many people over there always share really good stuff in the forum, which is another reason to join. Look at this list. This sums up what's happening. Updated list, forces of light versus forces of darkness. It's literally like a cartoon. It's like a Disney movie, something along those lines, where the forces of light, somehow America side by side with Israel, side by side with all these other countries, and of course side by side with the LGBTQ community and the trans community, because that makes sense, right? And I mean, as if that's its own country. I mean, it's utter insanity. And if anybody was the forces of darkness, throw the LGBT flag and the trans flag in there because we're talking about forces of pure, utter insanity. Okay? That's what that group is. So we're standing side by side with that. And of course, the forces of darkness. This is how they're herding countries into World War III. This type of mindset, right? You see all these countries, forces of darkness. You're putting Ireland in there, right? They're put China in there, Russia. I mean, it's really utterly insane how they're getting away with this. But what's even more insane is that Christians are being duped by this. So I'll have content covering stuff like this over on Eye for an Eye. So sub to those channels now. Here is the video exclusive from the website uprisingrevival.com about what is called the blood libel, which they don't want you to ever talk about. And this video will likely get a strike, so watch it while you can.
YouTube says it has had enough of vaccine misinformation on its site.
And false stories from phony sites to run circles around major news outlets.
Many people don't know the difference between something real and something created to deceive them.
Open your eyes.
If you've ever had this feeling that something was terribly wrong with the world that we live in, but you couldn't figure out just what it was, then you've come to the right place. Secret societies, mystery religions, and the Illuminati have been controlling our reality since the beginning of time. But not anymore, because there is an awakening happening, and you are about to become a part of it. Wake up, because this is a call for an uprising.
This is a call for an uprising. Welcome to today's show exclusively here on a callforanuprising.com. The nerve of these people just continues to, grow and grow and grow. So you might remember Gilad Erdan, Israel's UN ambassador, the guy that, while all the attacks began, was flying all around the globe so he can get in front of a camera, so he can use the same talking points about how it's Israel's 9/11, how they can victimize Israel. And you could tell anybody with a soul could look at this guy and know that he's a legitimate scumbag. He doesn't even have real emotions, so he's just reading off of paper. If he was actually victimized, then he'd be speaking from the heart. But these people just read off a script like everything they do. And they always have these talking points so that your brain remembers these events like 9/11 or the Holocaust to try to garner sympathy. But these people are so out of touch, and they resemble a lot of people in our society today, how they act, very narcissistic, very entitled, and they really don't have any self-awareness of how they actually sound. So I'm going to play you a clip from Gilad Erdan, and I want you to listen to him actually having the balls to bring up the blood libel, calling it Israel's blood libel. What's happening to them is a blood libel. No, Gilad, that's not what a blood libel is. In fact, the blood libel for people out there, especially conservatives who want to support Israel, who talk about adrenochrome all the time, maybe they should start by looking at the origins of vampirism, whatever they call it, vampires, and look at the origin of adrenochrome, et cetera, because all of that is in the teachings of the fake Jews. All of it is in the Talmud and the Zohar, drinking of blood, specifically the blood of Christian children. But let's start by listening to him talk about the blood libel.
When you say those terrible words that these heinous attacks did not happen in a vacuum, you are tolerating terrorism. And by tolerating terrorism, you are justifying terrorism. Hamas, as the minister explained, beheaded babies, burned families, raped women, abducted kids, babies, Holocaust survivors. And the SG is blaming the victim? You are blaming Israel? This is a pure blood libel. This is a pure blood libel, and I think that the Secretary General must resign. Because from now on, every day that he is here in this building, unless he apologizes immediately, today we called him to apologize, there's no justification to the existence of this building.
So for those of you that don't know, I've covered this many times, and it's a great time to cover it again since he's bringing it up. I'm actually going to tell you about the origins of the blood libel. So we have vampires obviously running rampant in our culture, and it's not just because of the gore, it's not just because of blood, it's the normalizing of it. And you might have noticed how people want to identify as vampires. They've made it cool. People are like, oh, I'd love to be a vampire. They dress up as vampires. This is all done by design psychologically on a subconscious level, people not even realizing this. They're like, I like Twilight. So they don't even realize, hey, do you like to drink blood? They're like, well, I don't know. I'd like to be a vampire. And eventually they'll get everybody on board with their fake Jew religious tradition. So the book and the first origins of vampire books, Dracula, Bram Stoker, actually got the idea to do this from the blood libel. So the blood libel, I'm going to read you, because remember, now I can use these things like Wikipedia. And remember, anytime you see these things pop up first, this is the exact opposite of the truth. So everything I'm going to read to you is the opposite is true. So the blood libel, by definition, according to Wikipedia, the blood libel or ritual murder libel is an anti-Semitic canard which falsely accuses Jews of murdering Christian boys in order to use their blood in the performance of a religious rituals, echoing very old myths of secret cultic practices in many prehistoric societies. The claim, as it is leveled against Jews, was rarely attested to in antiquity. According to Tertullian, it originally emerged in late antiquity as an accusation made against members of the early Christian community of the Roman Empire. Once this accusation had been dismissed, it was revived a millennium later as a Christian slander against Jews in the medieval period. This libel, alongside those of well poisoning and host desecration, became a major theme of the persecution of Jews in Europe from that period down to modern times. Blood libels often claim that Jews require human blood for the baking of matzos, an unleavened flatbread, which is eaten during Passover. So let me just rewind real quick here so we don't overstep and forget about some of the stuff mentioned, okay? Christians and most conservatives are now aware of adrenochrome, right? We hear them talking about it. We hear Q talking about it. So now is when Christians need to wake up and realize that all of this stems back to the Jews. Now, when you hear about these accusations, you think Christians were just making it up? They had nothing better to do but to accuse people of drinking their Christian blood? I don't think so. What you see specifically is how they try to deflect off the Jews by saying that early Christian communities blame the Roman Empire. Well, who do you think and where do you think the Jews emerged from? These aren't literal Jews. These are not God's chosen people. These are not specifically who they claim to be, okay? So while Christians were claiming the Romans were doing it, and obviously they were doing it, the Jews continued to do it. They just were no longer called the Roman Empire. In other words, they never stopped doing it throughout history. And now they have this huge wall of protection after the Holocaust, which again, lots of accusations then about the blood libel. And of course, we have other places talking about the origins of the blood libel and how it's a crazy Jewish conspiracy, because people like me have been calling them out on it for years, how they've normalized vampirism. And then they come out and they go, well, didn't you know Bram Stoker was anti-Semitic? I mean, there's literally articles out there on the anti-Semitic history of vampires. Dracula, Horror Story are anti-Semitic. I mean, Nosferatu, the blood libel, and the Jews, right? Nobody thinks of the origins of this stuff. They're just like, yeah, I guess some guy just came up with this idea about vampires, and then everybody copied him and wrote a million stories because it was popular and it made money. Because again, that's the dumbed down thinking. They've trained people to think this way, that everything's about money. And, one person had a great idea and everybody ran with that idea. Then Hollywood just kept making the movies. No, they've been conditioning people, and they're going to obviously eventually have people accept these traditions in public. That's the point. What do you think they're doing with the transgender stuff? This all is origins of the Talmud, like I talked about on YouTube, okay? They're taking all the things that are in their books, which nobody knows are in their books, and they're normalizing it in our society. So people are like, what's going on? Why is everybody all of a sudden trans? Where'd this craziness come from? It all stems from them, who are the people you can't question, right? So if you bring anything up, you're anti-Semitic. If you bring up their books, you're anti-Semitic. How could they come up with these things? They're victims. They follow the Old Testament. Oh, they're true, followers of God. They're waiting for their Messiah. Nobody seems to get it, okay? They're in control of everything. They're not real Jews, so stop defending them and acting like they are. They are not, okay? This is no different than some guy, when you hear somebody commit mass murder, then they're like, well, I accepted Jesus, though, so I'm saved. And you probably in your heart go, well, I mean, I'd like to believe that, but do you really believe that? Do you really believe that a guy could commit 75 murders or be Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer? I mean, and even if you want to believe it and say, well, they found Christ and they're accepted, you still have to be skeptical of these people, because how anyone who has Christ could do things like that, have the Holy Spirit with them, do things like that. But anyway, my point being is that they aren't who they claim to be. So people out there continue to be like, well, Carl, you're going a little too hard on these people. They're still God's chosen people. No, they're not God's. That's the point. The point is that, yes, you're starting to go, oh, they're wicked and everything, but we're told to protect them and love them, and they're the apple of God's eye. They're not who they say. They just made it up. They hijacked it because they knew they'd be protected from their wicked acts, and that they could create these events and then be protected, and then they could lure Christians, which they ultimately want to do. Their books talk about the destruction of Christianity, killing Christians. Exactly what you're hearing here with the blood libel, the drinking of children's blood, Christian children's blood. And eventually this is what they want to normalize. Remember, now we're seeing a separation here where Christians are going to side with Israel and some aren't. And the ones who don't, Christians are going to turn on them and be like, well, they're not real Christians. Like I hear all the time on YouTube about me. Oh, he's not a real Christian. He yells. He's not a real Christian because he doesn't sound like what we're told is a real Christian, right? All these churches that are all, tax exempt churches are all funded through Israel. They're the ones who keep them protected as long as they support Israel. You think if I ever wanted to become something like that, I'd be allowed to? Of course not. Not a million years. I would never want to be. But just if I was like, hey, maybe I'll do this and I could be protected and make my YouTube videos. They'll be like, wait, you're talking against Israel. No, you're not allowed to be. You're not a church. You're not a real Christian. You're not a Zionist. That's the point. So going back to this guy has the balls to bring up the blood libel. And I don't know if anyone's ever seen this clip, but I'm going to put it in here. And this is funny because this is from like 10 years ago, 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when a Hamas, how ironic, right? A Hamas spokesman came on CNN because, give me a terrorist group is on CNN. He comes on CNN, and Wolf Blitzer, the ultimate, this guy's as low as it gets. Can't imagine how many babies' blood this guy's drank and eaten, but he brings up the blood libel, and he brings up this stuff, and you can see how they deflect, right? They don't go, hey, how come throughout human history they've been accused of this? Oh, somebody just made it up. They were like, oh, they're mixing it with food. And another thing to note with all the QAnon stuff is that people have become wise to the fact that they put fetuses and stuff in our food, in Coca-Cola, et cetera, right? But nobody seems to understand that this origin comes from Babylon, okay? And the books that the Jews follow, the fake Jews, are all Babylonian teachings. about cannibalism, about eating and drinking children's blood, et cetera, et cetera. So these people claim to be awake, but they're not. So anyway, here's Wolf Blitzer. Listen to how they deflect. The fact they bring this up on national news and did this one time is pretty incredible. But it tells you that they were feeling the need to get this message out there to deflect off of the topic of the blood libel. And you're going to hear this more and more now with this war, because Hamas was accusing them of drinking Christian blood, et cetera, et cetera. Now, this is staged. The guy on the show deflects off his answer and doesn't really confront it. But look how many times Wolf Blitzer brings this up.
All over the internet, remarks that you made recently to El Quds TV, and I'm going to read it to you in the English translation. We had translators make sure the translation was accurate. I want you to explain what you said, because it's very disturbing. You said, "We all remember how the Jews used to slaughter Christians in order to mix their blood with their holy matzahs. This is not a figment of the imagination or something taken from a film. It is a fact acknowledged by their own books and historical evidence." You believe that Jews would kill Christians to mix their blood to bake the holy matzahs on Passover? Is that your belief, Mr. Hamdan?
Well, Wolf, let me answer that freely. Don't cut me, because it's very, very, very important to be clarified. First, I was asked about a statement published by the Deputy Speaker of the Knesset, the Israeli Parliament.
I understand that, but I just want to be specific and just answer the question. And maybe I'll remind you what you said. I'm going to play it in Arabic. Here's what you said on El Quds TV.
I know what I've said.
I want to play this for you. Just listen to this, and then you'll explain what you mean. Let's play the tape. Let's play the tape.
You don't know.
وكلنا يتذكر كيف كان اليهود يذبحون المسيحيين ليخلطوا دماءهم بفطيرهم المقدس. هذه ليست بدعة وهمية أو فيلم سينمائي، هذه حقيقة.
So do you believe that Jews used to slaughter Christians to mix their blood to bake matzahs?
You have to ask that for the church which claims that, you know, this is the fact. You cut the words, not you. The Israelis, in memory, they cut the facts and they start this propaganda.
But you,
Thank you.
All right, we're going to leave it there, Mr. Hamdan. But I was hoping to get a flat denial from you that you would utter such ridiculous words that Jews would kill Christians in order to use their blood
but someone
to bake
said that.
matzah.
Okay.
That sounds, as you know,
Wolf,
that is an awful smear.
Wolf, you have to be fair. You can't end that. I must end that because you asked me and I want to answer. This was said by everyone. I was saying they are part of what was being said. He has to deny what he write about the Palestinians.
So it's pretty incredible, right? That they're bringing this up on the news, that they're actually talking about this. But the guilt is all over these people. Remember, they're narcissists to a point of unself-awareness, right? So they bring all these things up and they don't know how desperate they look. And unfortunately, we live among people who don't critically think. So what they're doing is building a wall of protection where people act like they act and automatically just go, oh, that's crazy, that's a conspiracy theory, etc. Instead of going, why do they keep talking about this? Why are they even bringing attention to something so ridiculous? Or just the notion of why did all these people constantly run them out of every country they're in? And why were their claims going against them? You can't just make claims up like this. This is like the witches. Like, oh, they just came after us because they didn't like how we looked and how we dressed. We wore black lipstick. No, they came after you because you were doing this right here. You were killing babies and children. And Christians weren't going to stand for it. In today's society, unfortunately, it looks like Christians are going to stand for it because they're going to stand side by side with the same people doing this. So we are seeing a massive hurting and a massive deception. So they come out, they bring attention to the blood libel, which to me is absolutely incredible. And I want to play another clip for you because I thought this was interesting in looking at some of the stuff. I was trying to find some clips on the blood libel so you can get an understanding. This is from, I believe it's like a Jewish library or whatever, where they're trying to be historian. They also try to deflect off of these things. And listen to some of the stuff in here talking about, pretty much like black blood, referencing black goo and how Jews have black goo in them. I never had heard this before till now, so it's starting to make a lot of sense with the references to the black goo and the graphene. This is totally different, but we're seeing the Jewish world order, the fake Jew world order taking over right now with their foot on the gas pedal. And notice, again, the same stuff with deflecting on why they were doing the stuff with the blood and what it really meant spiritually, as opposed to really why Jews wanted to drink blood. You know, they were claiming that they wanted the blood of Christ, so they had to kill Christians and drink their blood. So listen to this, how they try to flip this propaganda. But it's interesting to note the stuff regarding the black goo. And remember, everything that these guys say is the opposite of truth.
We see in the course of the history of medicine this constant intertwining between religion and medicine, healing and faith. Blood, because it's that which literally moves through our veins, is seen as having this life force that will captivate almost every culture in the world. And for the ancient Greeks, for the medieval world, blood had this symbolism. Around the year 400 BC, there developed, in one text in particular, the notion of the four humors. This was an attempt to explain why one is healthy or one is unhealthy. And the argument was that these four liquids, these humors, which are blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm, mix together, and when properly mixed, i.e. balanced, the body is healthy. Then, about 500 plus years later, you get the figure of Galen, who very selectively chose between the Hippocratic texts and decided, this one text that identifies these four humors is an authentic text of Hippocrates. The theory of the four humors develops into the notion that we can identify personality types, what become known as the temperaments. One who has a predominance of blood is by temperament sanguine, and therefore the most healthy. Those who have too much yellow bile are choleric, and as such are fiery and angry. Those who are associated with phlegm are, appropriately enough, phlegmatic, are considered kind of lazy or sluggish and fairly pessimistic. And those who are associated with black bile are what we refer to as melancholic. Within that system, the four humors become emblematic of personality traits, but also become elements of the body to be manipulated through diet, through bloodletting, and otherwise, in order to retain balance or restore balance and avoid imbalance, disorder, i.e. disease. Blood is seen as the most powerful, the most important, and the healthiest, while black bile is seen as its opposite, as a source of weakness, a source of emotional fragility, that is fear and anxiety, and a source of antisocial behavior, that is you shun society. Each one of the arguments that the sanguine person is healthy, the melancholic is unhealthy, is inevitably built around inequality and arbitrary value. By that logic, there are certainly arguments that are made that certain groups are associated with specific temperaments, often with negative implications. Jews are associated with the humor of the black bile, and as such are associated with anxiety, with sadness, with the desire to be away from people. And this, of course, gets mapped into the social realities of, say, the 13th, 14th, or 15th centuries. Now, it gets more complicated when you discuss the relatively uncommon but occasional references to the idea that the Jewish male menstruates. According to this argument, the male Jew is seen to be colder than the ordinary male. And as a result of that coldness, the Jewish male needs to somehow remove fluid just as the woman does. And it's that becomes this marker of distinction between the Christian male body and the Jewish male body. But also, the most common argument on the theological level is that male Jewish menses occurs as a consequence of the crucifixion itself. The idea that his blood be on us and on our children is a connection of the blood of Christ with the Jewish people. The claim that some Christians make is that the only cure for Jewish male menses is the blood of Christ itself, i.e. to convert to Christianity and take up the Eucharist, What these Christian writers then argue is that Jews misinterpret that and begin to claim that any Christian blood will cure them of this condition. That then leads to the belief that, Jews kill Christian children in order to collect their blood and use it for this curative purpose.
So constantly bringing attention to the blood libel. And again, the blood libel, the origins of vampires, right? Let's just recap. Comes from Bram Stoker and, Dracula, right? And now we have 8 million Dracula movies normalized in our society. You have teenagers who want to be vampires. You have celebrities who pretend they're vampires like Machine Gun Kelly and Megan Fox. Well, they pretend to be because they really are, because they really drink blood, right? So they're trying to normalize this and make it cool because this is what they do together in their traditions and their culture. And this is going to be the way that they want society to live, just like I said earlier about the trans stuff. So they normalize those things, right? Everybody just goes, oh, somebody made up an idea about vampires. They made 9,000 movies. No. The blood libel, actual accusations being made against Jewish people who are not real Jews, which has origins in the Roman Empire, which goes back to Babylon, taking the blood of children and then baking it into their matzos, unleavened flatbread, which is eaten during Passover. And then I'm just going to finish reading from the wiki before I finish up. Earlier versions of the blood libel accused Jews of ritually reenacting the crucifixion. The accusations often assert that the blood of Christian children is especially coveted, and historically blood libel claims have been made in order to account for the otherwise unexplained deaths of children. In some cases, the alleged victims of human sacrifice have become venerated as Christian martyrs. 3 of these, William of Norwich, Little Saint Hugh of Lincoln, and Simon of Trent, became objects of local cults and veneration, and although he was never canonized, the veneration of Simon was added to the general Roman calendar. One child who was allegedly murdered by Jews, Gabriel of Babelosh, was canonized by the Russian Orthodox Church. In Jewish lore, blood libel served as the impetus for the creation of the Golem of Prague by Rabbi Judah Loew Ben Bezakel in the 16th century. And again, this stuff all is real. It's legit. And people should know now more than ever, because everybody out there, even conservatives, right? With all the stuff that's been going on with the vaccine, etc., what have we seen? Oh, they put the Wikipedia thing up, right? And everyone goes, believe the opposite. But they refuse to do it when it comes to the Jews because they refuse to read scripture about how these aren't real Jews. And they're almost, I understand being afraid to say, whoa, I don't want to, God says the apple of their eye. But keep reading the Bible. Keep reading. Go to Romans chapter 9. Go to the Revelation, the book of Revelation. They claim to be Jews and are not. They're of the synagogue of Satan. They're pretending to be so that you protect them. The same people that they're going to slaughter. Because if Christians, are you going to tell me that you're going to call them the apple of God's eye after reading the Talmud and the Zohar? Read their books. I tell you now, if you're questioning me, read their books. Find PDFs on it. Read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It talks about murdering Christians. It talks about mocking and Jesus Christ being in hell, praising the Pharisees. It talks about future plans of Christian destruction, the blood of Christians. That's what's happening right now, and it's starting with Muslims, and it's going to work to Christians. And there's going to be Christians who go along with them, who probably will be saved and preserved, because it'll probably mean more to them to have these Christians led away from Christ, worshiping them and their false Messiah. So they'll probably keep them alive, and Christians will go along with it, and then slaughtering the rest of us. But I mean, a lot of us are going to fight against it and do whatever we can, because they've tried to do this throughout history and they've been stopped. That's why I emphasize to my audience, or the audience that listens to this channel, we talk about the end times, etc., and everyone's like, well, this is God's will, this is going to happen. I'm not saying that it's not. But other people in other time periods have looked at what they've done and looked at what's going on. And while they've been waiting for God to return, they didn't sit there and bend over. They've made us compliant. They've made us weak by design so that we don't fight back against them. Because throughout history, civilians have fought up and rose up against them and what they've tried to do. And they're continuing to try to do it now. So it doesn't mean that we can't rise up against it. But it would take uniting conservatives and Democrats in this country, because the Democrats out there are seeing the wickedness of Israel going on in Palestine. And, they're narrating this, and I'll do separate videos on it, how they're trying to say, well, that's because liberals hate white people and they hate, blah, blah, blah. But really, a lot of liberals don't want to see violence or anybody get killed, which is a good thing, right? And the Christians are now going, kill them all. They're going after God's chosen people because they're clueless. But you could talk to these people, and if they understood the teachings come from them and that they've divided them against white people, but really they should be against these people, then everybody would be on the same page. And these unhinged liberal people could start, working for the right cause, and they could do all their spazoid protests, etc., against the people that are, using them and manipulating them to turn on us. But they won't realize it. But there's still a chance to do that. So anyway, this guy has the nerve to come out and talk about the blood libel. The Jews are responsible for the blood libel. It's why we see vampires normalized in our culture. And the fact that they're bringing it up, it tells me that they're going to start using things like that again, so that becomes a new blood libel. So anybody who looks up and tries to find history on blood libel won't even know what the blood libel was. They'll just think, oh, blood libel, I've never heard that before, and think it has to do with the slaughtering of Jews in Israel today. That's why he's bringing it up. Think about that. Because most people have never heard of the blood libel, right? And throughout history, they have. But today's society, never taught in schools. They take out any videos on YouTube regarding the blood libel unless it tells the Jewish narrative. So when they hear blood libel, nobody other than people who are awake are going to go, whoa, they brought up the blood libel. So people out there are going to have that program into them, just like they are with the 9/11. And they're going to go, yeah, it's a blood libel. They're just killing off Jews. And then whenever blood libel comes up, that's what they're going to think of, not the actual history of the blood libel and how this goes back to them doing this with children throughout history. So that was done by design. That's why he said that, because he's reading off of a script. They wouldn't want that word out there. They probably said, hey, you know what? While we're at the center of the eye here, and so a lot of people are siding with Palestine, we better make sure that nobody finds out the history of the blood libel, since people have become aware of adrenochrome and they become aware of child sacrifice and trafficking. So they're bringing it up again, so that you think that the blood libel, or the common person thinks blood libel is this new Jewish term referencing what's going on now. And it's not. It's referencing what they've done throughout history with children. Sacrifice, Christian children drinking their blood. It's absolutely sickening. But this is what we're living in, folks. Everything that you know that's corrupt and perverse in our culture goes back to the origin of the fake Jew. Okay? And I'll emphasize the word fake, because that's what they are. Don't feel, they want you to feel shamed even saying it. Like, oh, because that's how bad they've beaten it into us. Don't feel shamed. The stuff in their books will make your blood boil. Go watch Ted Pike's documentaries that are up on YouTube, if they're still up there. I put a few up here. Watch them. Listen to what they say. You don't have goosebumps? Your blood doesn't boil when you hear this? You are filled with rage when you find out that we've all been duped? The reason our culture's heading the way it is because of them, because they've taken control of all these Zionist politicians. And the ultimate goal is to kill us. And some of you might sit there and go, well, let them kill us then. Well, what about all those souls that are getting led to hell because of their deception? They're behind all these deceptions. They're behind the school system, the corruption, the fake history, the brainwashing, the dumbing down. They're behind it. And then the normalizing of this stuff. It's sickening. I thank everybody for being here. I appreciate you guys being on the website. Hope a lot of you will stick around. Definitely check out the forum if you haven't yet. Thanks again, everybody. God bless all of you, as always, and your families.